A woman sits across from her husband of 30 years. Her hands shake as she holds a white envelope. Dr. Phil stands frozen between them, his expression caught somewhere between disbelief and awe. The studio audience has gone completely silent. What she's about to reveal will shatter everything this man thought he knew about his marriage. But what happens next? No one in that room saw it coming. "Stop the tape," Dr. Phil says suddenly, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The cameras keep rolling, but everyone in the studio knows something unprecedented is about to happen. This isn't part of the script. This isn't rehearsed. This is the moment when a carefully planned show becomes something else entirely. 48 hours earlier, Linda Morrison walked through the stage door with a secret she'd carried for 3 decades. Her husband Robert sat in the green room, thinking they were here for standard marriage counseling. He had no idea what was coming. Linda's pre-interview had been different. Behind closed doors, she told producers everything. The producer stopped writing mid-sentence and said, "Dr. Phil needs to hear this directly from you." The taping began. Dr. Phil welcomed the couple, reviewed their relationship basics, but those who knew him could see something was different. The way he kept glancing at Linda. The slight adjustment of his posture. He knew something big was coming. "Linda," Dr. Phil said, settling into his chair, "you told my producers you have something to share with Robert today. Something you've never told him before." Robert's face showed confusion, then concern. He reached for Linda's hand, but she pulled back gently. That small gesture sent a ripple through the studio. Audience members shifted in their seats. "I need to tell you something," Linda began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I should have told you a long time ago. Subscribe and leave a comment. Because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead." The confession started slowly. Linda described their wedding day 30 years ago, how safe she'd felt, how she'd promised herself she'd never let her past destroy their future. "But I was wrong," she said, voice cracking. "Wrong to think I could bury it. Wrong to think silence was the same as healing." Dr. Phil leaned forward. He could sense where this was going, but he let her tell it at her own pace. That's the thing about Dr. Phil that people don't always see on camera. He knows when to push and when to simply hold space. 2 months before our wedding," Linda continued, "something happened to me." The studio got quieter. Even the camera operators seemed to still their movements. "I was attacked. Assaulted. By someone I thought was a friend. I never reported it. Never told anyone. I was 22 years old and I thought if I just pretended it never happened, I could move on." Robert's face strained of color. His hand moved toward her again, but froze in midair, uncertain. Linda kept talking. "I got pregnant from that assault. I found out 2 weeks before our wedding." The gasp from the audience was audible. Robert stood up, then sat back down, then stood again. He looked at Dr. Phil as if seeking some kind of anchor in the chaos. "Our daughter Emma," Linda said, and now the tears were flowing freely. "The daughter you've loved and raised for 29 years. She's not biologically yours, Robert. And I've known that every single day of her life." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of silence that has weight. That presses down on everyone in the room. That makes it hard to breathe. Robert sank back into his chair. His mouth opened, then closed. No words came out. He looked at his wife of 30 years like she was a stranger. Dr. Phil stood up. This was the moment that couldn't be scripted. He walked slowly to the space between them, his voice softer, more careful. "Robert," Dr. Phil said, and there was something in his tone that made everyone listen differently. "I know this is devastating. I know you feel betrayed and confused and probably 1,000 other things right now. But I need you to hear something before you say anything. Can you do that?" Robert nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Phil turned to Linda. "Tell him why you're telling him now. Tell him about the envelope." Linda reached into her purse with shaking hands and pulled out a white envelope. She held it like it might explode. "6 months ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer," she said. "Stage 3. I started treatment immediately, and thank God, it's responding well. But when I got that diagnosis, all I could think about was dying with this lie between us. Dying and leaving you and Emma with this truth coming out some other way. Through a will. Through medical records. Through some random conversation after I was gone. She placed the envelope on the small table between them. This is a letter. A letter I wrote to Emma, explaining everything. I was going to have my lawyer give it to her after I died. But then I realized that was just another betrayal. Another way of taking the coward's way out. Dr. Phil's expression shifted. Something in his face softened in a way that the audience recognized. This wasn't just television anymore. This was someone's life unraveling and trying to reweave itself in real time. So I'm telling you now, Linda continued, while I'm here, while I can answer your questions, while I can tell you that every single day of our marriage I have loved you. Every single day, I have been grateful that Emma got you as her father. Because you are her father, Robert. In every way that matters, you are her father. Robert finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, broken. Did Emma know? Does she know? No, Linda said immediately. I never told her. I never told anyone. You're the first person I've ever said these words to out loud. Why? Robert asked, and the word contained universes of pain. Why didn't you tell me before we got married? Why didn't you give me a choice? Because I was terrified, Linda said. Because I was 22 and traumatized and convinced that if I told you, you'd leave me. And I couldn't bear to lose you. I know that was selfish. I know it was wrong. But I was so broken, Robert. And you were the only thing holding me together. Dr. Phil made a decision. He turned to the cameras. We're going to take a break. Robert needs space to process this without performing for an audience. During the break, Dr. Phil pulled Robert aside off camera. They stood in the wings, and Dr. Phil spoke quietly. Listen to me, Dr. Phil said. What she did was wrong. Keeping this secret for 30 years was wrong. You have every right to be angry. Every right to feel betrayed. But I need you to understand something. That woman sitting out there just handed you the truth when she could have taken it to her grave. She's telling you while she's still here to face the consequences. That takes a kind of courage most people never have. Robert's eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I can forgive this. I don't know if I can look at Emma and not see this lie every time. You don't have to know right now, Dr. Phil said. But you do have to decide one thing. Are you willing to stay in that chair and hear the rest of what she needs to say? Because there's more. And it matters. Robert nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. They returned to the stage. The audience could see something had shifted. Robert's posture was different. Still hurt, still processing, but somehow more present. There's something else, Linda said when they settled back in. Something I need you to understand about why I'm telling you now, in this way, on this show. She picked up the envelope again. I've been in therapy for 6 months. Ever since the diagnosis. And my therapist helped me understand that this secret has been poisoning our marriage in ways I didn't even realize. Every time you tried to get close to me, really close, I pulled away. Every time Emma asked about family medical history, I lied. Every time you talked about genetics and how Emma got your mother's eyes or your father's stubborn streak, I died a little inside. Dr. Phil nodded. He'd seen this pattern before. Secrets don't just hide in the dark. They shape everything around them. I thought I was protecting you. Linda continued. Protecting Emma. Protecting our family. But all I was doing was building a wall between us brick by brick, year by year, until we were strangers living in the same house. And when I got sick, when I thought I might die, I realized that wall was going to be my legacy. That's not what I want. I want truth. Even if it costs me everything. Robert spoke again, and this time his voice was steadier. The man who attacked you. Did you ever see him again? No, Linda said. He moved away shortly after. I heard years later that he died in a car accident. I felt nothing when I learned that. Just empty. And Emma, Robert said, and saying her name seemed to cause him physical pain. Does she suspect anything? No. She's always believed you're her biological father. And Robert. Linda looked directly at him for the first time since the confession began. You are her father. Biology doesn't change 29 years of you being there for every skin knee, every bad grade, every heartbreak, every triumph. You taught her to ride a bike. You walked her down the aisle at her wedding. You held your grandson for the first time and cried because you said he had your father's nose. That's real. That's not a lie. Dr. Phil stood up again. He walked to the edge of the stage, looked out at the audience, then back at the couple. When he spoke, it was clear he was choosing his words with extreme care. Here's what I know, Dr. Phil said. Betrayal is betrayal. It doesn't matter if it comes from a place of fear or self-preservation. Linda kept a secret that fundamentally changed the terms of Robert's entire life. That's not okay. It's not justified by trauma or fear or love. It's just not okay. Linda nodded, accepting the weight of that truth. But, Dr. Phil continued, and the word hung in the air. Here's what else I know. 30 years ago, a traumatized young woman made a decision out of desperation. She chose survival over honesty. She chose the illusion of normalcy over the risk of abandonment. Was it the right choice? No. But I understand why she made it. He turned to Robert. And now you have a choice to make. You can hold on to this betrayal. You can let it define the next 30 years of your life. You can look at your daughter and your grandson and see only lies. Or you can do something incredibly difficult. You can choose to see that the woman sitting across from you just gave you the gift of truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. She's fighting cancer, Robert. She could have kept this secret and let it die with her. But she didn't. Robert's jaw clenched. The struggle playing out on his face was visible to everyone watching. Anger. Hurt. Confusion. And underneath it all, something else. Something that looked like the ghost of 30 years of love. I need time, Robert finally said. I can't just forgive this right now. I can't pretend it doesn't change everything. It does change everything, Dr. Phil agreed. But it doesn't have to destroy everything. Not if you don't let it. Then something unexpected happened. Something that made Dr. Phil pause mid-thought, and the audience collectively hold their breath. Robert reached out and took the envelope from the table. He held it for a moment, feeling its weight. Then, slowly, deliberately, he tore it in half. Then in half again. And again. Until it was in small pieces on the floor of the stage. I don't need to read a letter you wrote for after you were gone, Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. Because you're not gone. You're right here. And we're going to deal with this while we're both alive. Together or apart, I don't know yet. But not through a letter. Not through lawyers. Face to face. Linda's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are, Robert said. And then, after the longest pause, he added, and I still love you. I don't know if that's enough to get through this. But it's there. 30 years doesn't just disappear because of one truth. Even a truth this big. The audience erupted. Not in applause exactly. More in a collective release of breath. Several people were openly crying. One woman stood up, then another, then the whole studio was on its feet. Dr. Phil walked over to his team off stage and said something quietly. Moments later, a therapist appeared. He handed Robert and Linda a card with contact information for trauma-specialized couples counseling and cancer support resources. This conversation doesn't end here, Dr. Phil said, turning back to face them both. This is where the real work begins. Not on camera. Not in front of an audience. But in a room with a professional who can help you navigate this. He looked directly at Robert. You don't have to forgive today. You don't have to have all the answers. But you showed up. You stayed in that chair. You tore up that letter. That tells me you want to fight for this. And that matters. Then he turned to Linda. You carried this alone for 30 years. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. But you also don't get to control how Robert heals from this. That's his journey now. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. 3 months after the taping, Dr. Phil received a letter. It was from Emma, their daughter. She had watched the episode with her parents' permission. She wrote that she'd held her father's hand through the entire viewing, and at the end, she looked at him and said, "You're my dad." Nothing changes that. The letter also said that Robert and Linda were in therapy. That it was hard. That some days felt impossible. But they were fighting. Together. Dr. Phil kept that letter in his desk. Not because it had a happy ending, they were still working through it, but because it showed something more important. That truth, no matter how painful, creates the possibility of real healing. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak it out loud, face the consequences, and hope that love is stronger than betrayal. That's the legacy of this moment. Not forgiveness. Not even reconciliation. But the courage to stop hiding and start healing.